great world of golf, where status matters more than skill, a quiet black coach trains her young protege under the weight of prejudice and dismissive stares. When a man she once defeated in a secret match resurfaces and accuses her of manipulating public land, she's forced into the spotlight. As a public showdown ignites and media frenzy erupts, the world is about to learn she never played for glory, but for something far greater, to protect a home for forgotten children. Before we dive in, this story lets us know where you're watching from. We love to hear your thoughts. The morning sunlight slid across the clipped hills of the Greenwell Reserve, that kind of manicured, quiet perfection that could only be purchased. Dew still clung to the edges of the eighth hole's fairway, glistening like glass under the summer sky. In the distance, the soft purr of electric golf carts and the echo of swinging irons formed the background hum of affluence. This wasn't just any golf course, it was the course. Members only, no public access, initiation fees rivaling small fortunes, and an unspoken rule that power walked here, polished and white. Everything in Greenwell, from the imported Bermuda grass to the architecture of the clubhouses, whispered exclusivity. And she didn't belong here, not really. She stood still beneath the awning of the hitting bay, tall, dark skin gleaming under a short-brimmed visor, a black zip-up jacket hugging her shoulders despite the warmth. Her stance was composed, quiet, like a statue carved not for worship, but for endurance. On her left hand, just under the curve of the thumb, was a narrow scar, thin, pale, the kind that whispered of something stitched in haste, in secret. She never spoke of it. Her name was Ava. To the members of the club, she was that woman. To her student, she was coach. "Widen your stance," she said, voice low and measured. "You're over-rotating." The young man before her, blond, square-jawed, with a lean golfer's frame, adjusted. He didn't argue. Not anymore. His name was Jordan, 25, formerly skeptical, formerly loud, formerly very sure of how the world worked until the day she'd beaten him clean with a half set of irons and no warm-up. He'd come to test her that day 6 months ago, a dare from a friend, a smirk that faded into silence by the ninth hole. He'd lost more than a match. He'd lost the illusion that raw talent alone could outpace wisdom honed in the shadows. Now he listened. "You're gripping the club like it's your father's throat," Ava said, stepping to his side. He glanced at her with a slight grin. "How'd you know my dad was a bastard?" "I don't," she replied without looking. "But you swing like you're still trying to prove him wrong." She pointed at the ball. "Try again, no force, just presence." He inhaled, exhaled, and swung. Crack! The ball soared, a clean high arc over the horizon, dropping right at the edge of the green. Ava said nothing but nodded once. Jordan turned, looking for something in her expression. She gave him nothing. He rocked 2 discs, each angling at a different angle. He gave him nothing. "You're not going to say good shot." "You'll know when it is," she said. "When it doesn't feel like a shot at all." Jordan chuckled softly, shaking his head. "You ever compliment anyone?" "Not when they need it," she said. He smirked, set another ball. Ava folded her arms and stepped back, her fingers brushing the scar on her palm absently. Old pain, dulled long ago, but it always twitched when the sun hit it just right. She had never meant to coach again, especially not here. Greenwell was the kind of place that offered no apologies for how it looked at people like her, black, quiet, uninvited. The only reason she was allowed in was because Jordan's father, a senator, had pulled a favor. She hated favors, but Jordan wasn't like his father, not anymore. Not since she'd shown him what silence could teach. Then came the sound, the clack of expensive shoes on concrete and the hollow chuckle of someone who believed he had the right to interrupt. A man approached, tall, silver-made, linen polo stretched over a sculpted chest. His tan was groomed like everything else about him. Owen McAllister, a name that came with weight in golf circles, former national finalist, known more for his brand deals than his backswings, still sharp, still arrogant, and still deeply annoyed by things he couldn't explain or control. "Morning," he said, loud enough to be overheard by the few onlookers nearby. Didn't realize the club started offering lessons to charity cases. Jordan straightened. Ava said nothing. Owen walked closer, eyes settling on Jordan. So, this is where you've been hiding. Huh, thought maybe you were training for a real match. But now I see, he turned to Ava, smile tight. I see they let anyone in these days. Must be nice, using money to buy your way into respect. Jordan stepped forward, fists clenching. Back off. Owen grinned wider. Oh, relax, I'm just saying. Training with a woman who's not even a name. You planning to lose again this year or just looking for style points? Ava's eyes remained on the ball, still sitting on the tee. Jordan moved, but she held up a hand, not with force, just presence. He stopped. She doesn't need to answer you, Jordan said coldly. She's the best coach I've ever had. Cute, Owen sneered. But if you want to be a champion, you might want someone who's actually played in a real tournament. Or maybe not. Maybe you like being the underdog with the mystery coach. Adds drama. A few heads had turned, not many. This was Greenwell. People didn't interfere. They watched. Ava finally spoke, eyes still on the grass. Hit the next one. Jordan hesitated. She looked at him, then, just for a second, calm. In control. Not here for this. Hit the damn ball, she said softly. Jordan turned. Inhaled, exhaled. Owen crossed his arms. Pretend I'm not even here. Though that seems to be your specialty. Jordan swung. Another clean hit, straighter, deeper. Ava didn't nod this time. She didn't have to. And Owen? He stood still, watching the ball disappear, his lips tightening. But Ava never looked at him. She was already turning away, toward the next station. And Jordan followed. Quietly, loyally. The game was never about who spoke loudest. It was about who kept walking. The sun had begun to rise higher now, spilling over the fairways like liquid brass. The heat crept in, slow and heavy, curling under shirt collars, soaking into the fibers of carefully chosen golf wear. But Ava stood motionless in the light, untouched by it, immune to its weight. She wasn't watching the horizon. She was watching him. Owen McAllister still lingered at the edge of the hitting bay, arms crossed, mouth curled in that half-smile of men who'd never had to learn the weight of silence. He wasn't here for golf, not really. He was here to claim something, control, perhaps, or the last word. Tell you what, he said, stretching his shoulders. Let's make this useful. A quick match, 9 holes, you and me. Let's see if all that meditative silence actually teaches a swing. Ava said nothing. Her gaze flicked to Jordan, who stood still, hands wrapped around the shaft of his driver like it was the only solid thing in the world. Owen leaned in closer. Or are you afraid your little monk routine won't hold up in a real game? A pause. The kind of pause that could split a moment in two. I'm not here to prove myself, Ava said finally, her voice so low it forced those nearby to lean in just to hear, especially not to you. Owen chuckled. Of course you're not. People like you never are. Always hiding behind someone else's swing. Jordan flinched. He looked at Ava, jaw clenched. Then he stepped forward, heart in his throat, fists tightening beneath his gloves. Let me play him, he said. If you won't. Ava's eyes locked on his. She didn't blink, didn't move. The silence between them wasn't hesitation. It was calculation. Precise, tactile. She was measuring something behind his face, the weight of his anger, the steadiness of his intent. Then, with a small breath, no more than an exhale, she nodded once. Owen's grin spread like oil on water. Great. Let's give the audience a show. They moved to the first tee box. Small clusters of members gathered, some with golf bags slung over their shoulders, others with cocktails at 11 a.m. And farther back, a man with a camera, a young black filmmaker from a fledgling YouTube channel filming a mini-doc on representation in elite sports. He didn't speak, just zoomed in. He knew a moment when he saw one. Jordan adjusted his glove slowly. Owen was already stretching theatrically, cracking his knuckles, blowing hot air into his fists. Every movement was exaggerated, performative. Theatrics of a man who'd always known the rules were bent his way. Ava stood just behind Jordan, not in his shadow but in his periphery, close enough to anchor him, far enough to let him own it. "Visualize your third shot," she murmured. "Not your first." He nodded. Owen opened with a drive that curved beautifully over the first dogleg, a confident shot, the kind that drew murmurs of approval from the men in pastel polos. Jordan stepped up. Ava didn't say anything more. He inhaled, exhaled, and swung. The sound was clean, sharp, like a whip snap through still air. The ball soared, higher than expected, and lower on the fade. But instead of following the dogleg, it cut across the trees, on purpose, landing near the far end of the fairway. There was silence, then a murmur. Someone in the back said, "Was that luck?" Ava's jaw didn't move, but her fingers curled gently behind her back, pressing the scar on her palm. Not to hide it, but to remember. 3 holes in and Jordan was 1 stroke ahead. He played different. Not better, not faster, wiser. He played angles, not distance, slopes, not strength. He let the grass talk to him, and everyone watching began to realize this wasn't improvisation. This was design. A blueprint, built in silence. By the 6th hole, the murmurs had changed tone. They weren't about Jordan anymore. They were about her. That woman, that coach, the one who hadn't flinched when called out, the one who now stood, arms crossed, eyes narrowed, the architect behind every shot. Owen's smile had started to fade. His swing grew looser, shorter. He wasn't playing the course anymore. He was playing against the echo of someone's presence. By the 8th hole, he sliced a mid-range iron into the sand. Jordan didn't celebrate. Ava didn't blink. On the final green, Owen missed his putt by 2 inches, not by lack of skill, but by something deeper. A fracture in confidence, the kind that only exists when someone unexpected exposes your limits. Jordan sank his shot clean. Applause came, not loud, but sharp, unmistakable. And Ava, for the first time that morning, stepped forward. Owen stood near the edge of the green, sweat beading along his hairline. His hand brushed past Ava's as she walked by, and stopped. His eyes dropped to the scar. Barely visible, but to him it was a flare in the dark. His breath caught, just slightly. Years ago, in another place, in another match, he'd seen that scar. The woman who'd beat him without a name, without a face, just a shadow, a whisper in the elite circles of off-the-record games where reputations were traded like stocks. And now she stood before him, still nameless, still silent, but not invisible. Ava paused beside him, not looking at him, not giving him anything. Then she walked on. Behind her, Jordan followed, carrying the bag, not like a caddy, but like a man who knew whose footsteps he was in. The crowd parted slowly, the camera kept rolling, and the silence she left in her wake spoke louder than any trophy. It didn't take long for the footage to spread, the match, the silence, the scar. It was all there, compressed into a 37-second clip uploaded by a young videographer named Lyle, whose YouTube channel had never broken 500 views before. This time, it broke 100,000 in 12 hours. The title read, "Who is she?" No hashtags, no names, just a question and a face that refused to play the part. 3 days later, the silence was gone. It was replaced by heat. Headlines, the low hiss of attention morphing into accusation. Ava sat alone in the back corridor of the Marlowe Hotel, outside the conference center where the press preview for the international invitation would begin in 15 minutes. The cream-colored walls hummed with fluorescent buzz, and her reflection on the glass window looked foreign, hard, lit from above, eyes too still. In her lap, a printed page, a news article, no byline. breaking, unknown coach identified as unnamed player in secret elite stakes tournament linked to real estate grab in South London. Beneath it, a blurry frame of her scarred hand resting on a putter grip, and just below that, a side-by-side comparison with a surveillance still from a private tournament 5 years ago. One held behind closed gates, for men who traded land over whiskey and wedges. No face, just posture, a wrist, a silhouette, but it was enough. Owen McAllister hadn't wasted time. He didn't need to. He still had contacts, investors, old rivals. And he remembered the way he'd lost that game. It wasn't just the loss, it was the humiliation. He'd put up a multi-million-dollar land deal as a stake, and a nameless woman with a swing like math had taken it without ever telling him her name. He never forgave her, and now, years later, he saw his chance. Not to win, no, that was beyond him now, but to take something back, a name, a story, control. He fed the press a narrative that Ava was a silent shark, a player in underground circuits used by billionaires to bypass zoning laws, flipping land titles through friendly private games. That she wasn't just a coach, she was a fixer. That Jordan's rise was a product of her gamesmanship, not merit, and worst of all, that her presence at the Invitational was a backdoor arrangement, a favor pulled through whispered deals. Ava hadn't spoken to any reporter, but someone else had. The article had quoted an unnamed source, a member of the Invitational's planning board. Owen, no doubt, or someone bought by him. By evening, the pressure reached the organizing committee. A private meeting was held without her. The next morning, a polite envelope was slipped under her door. White, embossed. Miss Ava Elridge, we kindly request a clarification of your history and affiliations prior to the upcoming event. Beneath the wording, a silent demand, clear your name or step aside. Ava stood by the window now, staring down at the courtyard below where Jordan paced in circles, too restless to wait inside. She hadn't answered his calls all night, not because she didn't want to, but because she didn't know how. The weight of a name once taken off was harder to wear again. You were never supposed to find me, she thought, fingers resting over the scar. You weren't supposed to matter this much. Her mind flicked back. 2 years ago, that secret game in the desert, under sodium lights and silent guards. No press, no records. She'd gone under a pseudonym. She hadn't gone to win. She'd gone to stop something. A piece of city land, zoned for a shelter, had been turned into a private bet by 3 men in suits. One of them was Owen. They expected an easy win. She'd taken it from them, 1 hole at a time, and she'd vanished. That was the deal. Now they wanted her to step forward, not to fight, but to defend herself. The door opened softly. Jordan. He looked like hell, red-eyed, unsure whether to speak. You okay? He asked. Ava didn't turn around. No. A beat of silence. They want a match, he said. You and him, public. If you don't agree, they'll disqualify me too. Ava finally turned, meeting his eyes. Then don't play. He shook his head, voice rising. You think this is just about me winning a game? Ava, if you walk away now, everything they're saying becomes truth. They'll rewrite who you are while you stay quiet, again. I've survived worse than being misunderstood, she said flatly. That's not the point, Jordan snapped. You shouldn't have to. His voice broke at the edges, unexpected. I don't care about the title, but I care about you disappearing again. You said I had to stop swinging angry. Now I'm asking you to stop hiding scared. Her breath caught. He stepped closer. I don't want to be someone who won because no one questioned his mentor. I want to win knowing who stood behind me and why she had to stay quiet. Another beat, then Ava looked away, back toward the scar on her hand. The skin was smooth now, pale, but the memory under it stayed red. Finally, her voice, just above a whisper. Tell the committee I'll play, Jordan nodded slowly. As he left the room, she picked up the article again, stared at it a moment, then, without ceremony, tore it in half, then again, and again. She dropped the pieces into the trash. Her name had been stolen once. Now they'd see what she did when she owned it. The sky above the Invitational was a harsh blue, almost metallic under the late morning sun, the kind of day too bright to blink, too sharp to breathe deeply. The air smelled of cut grass and sunscreen and something synthetic underneath. Money, maybe. The gallery around the final hole had swelled beyond expectation. Reporters, club members, influencers with press badges they didn't earn, all leaning against the velvet ropes like spectators at a high-stakes trial. Somewhere beyond the clubhouse, a jazz quartet played a lazy tune for the brunch crowd that had no interest in the drama unfolding on the course. But here, by the tees, by the sand traps and manicured greens, everything had stilled into tension. Ava stood alone at the edge of the fairway, quiet and precise as always. Her visor shadowed her eyes, but the tension in her jaw gave her away to anyone looking closely. She wore black, not out of symbolism, but out of habit, and it clung to her like armor. Her gloves were worn smooth at the fingertips. Her hands looked steady. But inside, her pulse beat like footsteps down a long hallway. She could feel the cameras, the hush that fell every time she shifted her weight from one foot to the other. Somewhere nearby, Jordan waited just off the ropes, stiff-backed, arms crossed, his throat working like he had something to swallow but couldn't. Owen McAllister, the darling of legacy golf, the self-declared prince of the circuit, strutted to the tee like a man walking into a press conference he called himself. His polo was crisp, his tan curated, and his smile just crooked enough to suggest confidence, but not enough to betray the snarl underneath. The crowd responded to him like they always had. A few low chuckles, camera shutters, a ripple of polite applause. He was the man with the story, the headline, the accusation. He was the one who'd told the world that Ava Elridge wasn't just a coach, but a shadow operator who played backroom games for land, deals, and power. He opened the match with a practiced swing, a strong drive that traced a clean arc down the middle of the fairway. The gallery approved with murmured nods. Ava stepped up in silence. Her stance was efficient, her breath measured. When she swung, the sound was pure, but the shot was short, deliberately short. It landed 5 yards behind his, enough to raise eyebrows, enough to plant the seed. Maybe she really wasn't who they said she was. The murmurs began. First from the press section, then the gallery. Quiet doubts dressed in casual speculation. Maybe she's rusty. Maybe she was just a legend in whispers. Maybe Owen was right all along. Hole after hole, Ava trailed. 2 strokes behind, then 4. By the 5th hole, Owen smirked openly between swings, played up his commentary, thanked the crowd with false humility after each clean shot. And Ava let him. She never looked hurried, never explained, never flinched when he called her the silent shark within earshot of the broadcast mics. She played the course as if the course was watching, not the people. The wind, the light, the way the green changed color as clouds passed over. She let him lead, let the gallery begin to believe what they'd been fed. Then came the 6th. She adjusted the loft of her club at the last moment. A subtle change no one caught except Jordan, who straightened slightly, lips parting as if to say something but didn't. She swung, fluid, deliberate. And the ball didn't just fly, it curved, softly, almost lazily, but with intent. It landed beyond the slope, bounced off the natural swell of the earth, and rolled gently downhill to within inches of the pin. Gasps echoed. A few claps, scattered, uncertain. By the 7th, her tempo had changed. Her steps had shortened. She was no longer following. She was reclaiming. Her shots began to tell stories, using wind as a collaborator, slope as co-conspirator. By the 8th, she was even. On the 9th, she pulled ahead. Owen's swing cracked with effort, not control. His jokes thinned out, his jaw tightened. At the final hole, she didn't look at him, didn't look at the crowd. She looked only at the flag, flapping in the crosswind, and at the trees to the west, measuring wind shift by how the branches danced. When she struck the ball, it sliced diagonally, wrong-footing the commentators for a second, then caught a gust she had predicted and landed 2 feet from the hole. The silence that followed was different, not confusion, not doubt, reverence. Owen missed his final putt. When Ava tapped hers in, she didn't raise her arms, didn't smile. She only straightened, removed her glove, and stepped back from the green like it wasn't hers to stand on for long. Then the press surged. The microphones came in waves. Do you deny the allegations? Did you game the system to acquire city land? Is this your confession or your redemption? Owen, sweating now, pointed toward her with the fury of a man watching his version of reality collapse. She gamed a charity project. He barked. That land was supposed to go through zoning approval. She stole it. Played some quiet deal behind the scenes. What, you think a few lucky shots wiped that clean? A few reporters hesitated, unsure whether to follow his lead or wait. Then a man stepped through the crowd. No applause, no announcement, just presence. A well-cut charcoal suit, silver hair neatly combed, calm eyes. He walked directly to Ava and stood beside her, placing a hand on her back with the gentleness of someone who knew when strength was no longer about standing alone. "This woman," he said, voice carrying over the crowd, "is Ava Elridge, my wife, and the parcel of land in question has belonged to the Elridge Foundation for 5 years. We've never sold it, never developed it for profit. It's now the site of a center for homeless and at-risk youth, opening in 3 weeks." There was silence. Flashbulbs. He held up a folder, simple and gray. Inside are documents, city approvals, building permits, all signed, all clean. The camera's whirred, swiveling. Before anyone could respond, a second voice came in, young, female, sharp. "I have something to add." Lyle's assistant stepped forward, phone raised. "This is footage from 2 years ago, when Mr. McAllister applied to rezone that same parcel, claiming it was abandoned. He planned to build a private club. The documents were sealed. I have copies." Reporters pivoted. Owen stammered. Ava didn't move. She didn't have to. Because sometimes justice doesn't arrive with noise or force. It arrives with clarity, a swing so clean the truth lands at your feet, undeniable, and as the crowd turned toward her, microphones rushing to reframe their questions, Ava stood tall beneath the ruthless sun, not triumphant, not angry, but resolute. She hadn't played to prove anything. She'd played because some truths don't whisper. They only reveal themselves when you finally stop hiding. And she was done hiding. It was dusk when the final applause faded. The sky above the National Championship arena had turned a deep, hushed blue, tinged with the gold of dying sunlight bleeding behind the horizon. The banners along the fence fluttered gently, now wrinkled from a day of wind and ceremony. On stage, Jordan stood alone, a silver trophy in his hands, his name freshly etched into history. His posture was still proud, yes, but searching. His eyes kept scanning the edge of the crowd like he'd misplaced something vital, something more important than applause. Behind the stage, beyond the velvet ropes and security guards, Ava stood in the shadow of the corridor that led to the staff parking lot. She wore no credentials, no pass. No one questioned her. No one stopped her. Not anymore. Her clothes were plain, black turtleneck, old khakis, soft-soled shoes. But something about her felt monumental, even as she leaned quietly against the brick wall. In her left hand, she held a folded program. In her right, her glove creased at the fingers as if it still remembered the pressure of every shot she'd ever taught. The cheers still echoed from the stadium speakers, distant and diluted now. Her chest didn't rise fast, her heart didn't pound. But deep inside something moved, slowly like the ground shifting beneath old trees. The crowd hadn't noticed her slip away, not the sponsors, not the broadcasters, not the ones who now claimed to have always believed in her. Their eyes were elsewhere, on the winner, the stage, the champagne. They had gotten what they came for, victory. She didn't need it. A month had passed since the match with Owen, a month since everything came unspooled and rethreaded again. His former coach had been arrested on charges of corporate espionage, caught funneling confidential real estate documents to bidders with promises of profit. The press had buried the story under a week of frenzy, but Ava had read it in a quiet hotel room, nodding once, then never opening the article again. Owen had been banned from professional play indefinitely. The statement was cold, clinical, No redemption arc, no outrage, just a line drawn through a name. Justice, maybe, or at least consequence. She didn't celebrate. Jordan had trained harder than ever in the weeks that followed, not for vengeance, not to prove anyone wrong, but to prove something right. He no longer asked her to speak more. He simply stood beside her, mirrored her focus, respected her silences. He had become the kind of player she'd hoped he might be. Not perfect, but present. His final putt at the championship had been flawless, not dramatic, just whole. Ava turned now, stepping away from the corridor. Her shoes crunched softly on the gravel as she made her way to the side gate. The reception was still going on, music lilting from a distance, clinking glasses, names being repeated in speeches. She didn't look back. At the gate, just as she reached for the latch, she heard footsteps. Small, hurried. She turned. 3 children, no older than 10, came running toward her from the lot. One of them, a girl in red sneakers and a faded yellow hoodie, launched forward and threw her arms around Ava's waist without a word. The others followed, clutching her arms, burying their faces in her jacket. Ava froze. Her arms hovered for a moment, then gently folded around them one by one. Behind them, a woman stood watching, eyes glossy, hands wringing nervously. She stepped forward. "She told me you were the one," the woman said. Her voice cracked with something between awe and disbelief. "You're the reason my daughter sleeps in a real bed now?" Ava said nothing. She looked down at the children, their small fingers gripping her sleeves, their warmth soaking through the fabric. One of them looked up, soft eyes dark like her own. "Are you the lady from the building?" he asked. "The one who gave it to us?" Ava didn't answer, but she knelt, brushing a curl from his forehead, and whispered, "No one gave you anything. You took it back." Behind them, a reporter from a local station had wandered away from the reception. He raised his camera instinctively when he saw her, but paused. For a long moment he simply watched. Then he lifted the lens. The flash was soft, not intrusive, and this time Ava didn't look away. She didn't hide her face. She didn't bury her scarred hand. She stood tall in the warm spill of the streetlight, surrounded by 3 laughing children and a woman who had once been invisible in every system except hers. And for the first time, not in defiance, not in armor, Ava Elridge smiled into the camera. A small smile, almost imperceptible, but real. Then she turned, walked out into the night, not to vanish, not to disappear, but to return to the place where shadows do their best work, behind the scenes, shaping giants.